Today, Justice Sri Krishna panel is going to be submitting its report on data protection to Ravi Shankar Prasad. Let's go across to Nikhil Pahwa, the founder and editor and publisher at Medianama.com to discuss this. Nikhil, good afternoon. This is Nayantara from New Delhi. I know you have very strong views when it comes to this one. The TRAI has already submitted its views on what data protection laws should look like. Any way you see it, the Supreme Court has already ruled that the right to privacy is a fundamental right. We don't know yet what the contents of Justice Sri Krishna report is going to be. It's going to be submitted at 2 p.m. There's a press conference at 4 p.m. But there have been reports surfacing that maybe this is going to strengthen the Aadhaar Act. Incidentally, the UIDAI chairman is one of the members of this committee, and that RTI might be diluted.
Nayantara, I think there are significant concerns around the dilution of the RTI, which allows citizens like you and me to hold the government to account. And I think that's something which Parliament must guard against and push back against, at least the MPs who are not with the current ruling party. But I think one of the primary concerns from an ecosystem perspective right now is around the issue of data localization and whether the Indian users' data is going to be stored within India or it's going to be allowed to be taken outside the country. My view on that is that I would feel safer where the law protects me more. So if the EU has a stronger data protection law than India does, I would prefer that my data be in the EU because I have more rights over there. So in that sense, I think it all boils down to how strong our data protection law is, whether our data is owned by us as people, as citizens, which is, I believe, a right that the Supreme Court granted us. There are many nuances to this particular issue. Aadhaar is actually the problem here because, the government is trying its best to protect Aadhaar. And the question that we're all looking for answers to is how much of our privacy is going to be diluted in order to protect a deeply
Nikhil, I'm just going to interrupt you there. Nikhil, allow me to interrupt you there. I know Aadhaar and UIDAI is a separate conversation. We won't have enough time for it today. I will come to that in just a bit. But just talking again about the local storage of data. First of all, if this committee does recommend that this data has to be stored locally, do you see global giants like a Google or a Facebook or a WhatsApp or LinkedIn, etc., agreeing to that? And secondly, does that happen in other jurisdictions? For example, in EU, what happens? What happens in, let's say, a Japan or in Australia? Would you have access to that kind of information?
So I think in the EU, the way they're working it is that they claim jurisdiction over the data of EU citizens. And so therefore, no matter where in the world this data is kept, jurisdiction lies on, the jurisdiction over citizens' data lies with the EU as far as I understand. But the way to think about the repercussions of data localization is that it will destroy the global nature of the internet, where you can run any service from anywhere in the world and service users anywhere in the world. Now, if every country started doing that, it would balkanize the internet. It would make sure that some services, the latest services, are not accessible to citizens because they don't have the wherewithal or the bandwidth to specifically store data for Indian users within India and do that for every country in the world. So I think this is the risk that we run with a law like that's going to mandate data localization, that we might not get access to services or the government might end up banning these services. We had the same concerns around net neutrality because that was also going to impact, a lack of net neutrality would impact the global nature of the internet as well.
Okay, but coming back to what I was trying to ask you, I understand what the impact might be, but do you see these global giants agreeing to that in the first place, in case it is recommended? And we have seen certain publications get access to the draft report.
Yeah, so I think that's going to be a tricky one because many of these service providers, the larger ones, have anyway started setting up servers in India. Microsoft's doing it. Facebook, I believe, has said that they would do it. Google wouldn't probably not do something like that. Servers are almost inconsequential. Where they're kept is almost inconsequential from a service provisioning perspective. Except for smaller players, large players have the finances and the bandwidth and the resources to do that. Not everyone in the world does. So it shouldn't be that we're making a law for the larger players, and that's effectively destroying, the aspirations of all the smaller players.
Okay, Nikhil, unfortunately, we're running out of time, but thank you so much for joining us here. And here's an open invitation on live television. Be back with us once the report is submitted. We do understand there's going to be a press conference as well as 4 p.m. So we'll analyze Justice Sri Krishna's report in detail once it's out in the public domain.